Hello, friends, and welcome to the City of the Immaculata, a place where we discuss history and theology, principally through a Franciscan lens. This is a burgeoning new channel, and I ask you to please like and subscribe. And if you find this content helpful, please consider sharing it with the others. Today, we're going to look at what's unique about our theology. Some points of discussion. Why do we do theology? What are the modes of theology? And what's unique to Christian theology in particular? So first, why do we do theology? And the question here I want you to consider is theology ultimately speculative or is it practical? That is, does a perfected intellect suffice for sanctity or holiness? Another way to put that is an accumulation of information enough for us to become holy? Or does a will perfected in charity have priority? That is our theology practical? Is it one to be put into practice? Now, this saying here, excuse my Latin pronunciation, fides quaeriens intellectum, faith seeking understanding. This comes to us through from Augustine, moves to us through Anselm, on down the ages. And the idea here is that we do not first begin with understanding so that we may then come to believe. As if with an accumulation of data, we could, in any ways, um, by our own ability, acquire the theological virtues. First, we begin with faith, and this is why, for example, we baptize our infants. This is why we chrismate early. This is why we go to confession early, because we're beginning to give them the theological virtues, the gifts of faith. From there, they could seek understanding. Now, the mind is illumined for thought in general. This is what makes us the image, the imago Dei of God. And it's illumined for thought in general from the beginning. Even those without faith possess the ability to seek knowledge. But it's illumined to make the object, it's illumined to make the object of our will present to it. Christian knowledge is to be found in contemplating this object, this ends for our wills. And that's bound up in a movement that is principally for the sake of our becoming good. And I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. Our knowledge and our deeds are enlivened by a uniquely Christian affection. And again, I will be coming back to this at the end, but keep this in mind. First, by what means do we achieve this? Bonaventure gives three distinctions or modes that by which our intellects are elevated, that faith, that which we come to know after, that which we come to desire, and that which we come to ultimately to receive the good is brought about. And these modes are symbolic is the first one. This is the one that is universal and accessible to everyone. All of us, all Christians, should be passing through this mode and constantly coming back to it. This mode consists of, for example, something like the Creed, the Church's catechetical teachings, learning prayers, participation in the sacraments, the created realities that surround us that reveal who God is, and the liturgy, and so on and so forth. We assent to the word of God in obedience. We assent in faith. And through that, we give obedience to those authorized by Christ himself. That is, those who are of the church, our clergy, our bishops, our priests. After which, we are to practice this word that we have assented to, principally through participation in the liturgy, but the other ones as well, through our prayers, through our participation in the sacraments. Those who have been authorized are those who make accessible to us the symbols of the faith. And this is key to later putting into practice. And it's through this obedience of faith that the intellect is perfected, that it is elevated. And with its symbols, especially the sacraments and the liturgy, the good is understood. It's through this obedience of faith that we come to understand. Next is the academic. And this is theology proper, the theology that's done in books. And it's probably what most people think of when they think of a theologian. This is where the dogmatic theology, the symbols of the church, is worked out. This is where we apply what should be the illumined intellect, the intellect that has received faith, that's working out faith, back onto the symbols that God has revealed, and that which the church teaches, i.e. the first mode. It's important to realize that this is not the beginning or the end of theology. Even though we often think of the theologian as the person who has a lot of books on a bookshelf or who writes out theology for dissertation papers, to think that this is either the beginning or the ends of theology is to miss the entire point of Christianity. Truth has already been chosen by faith, and we seek understanding within the spirit of prayer and devotion, to go to reference back to St. Francis when Brother Anthony inquired of him whether or not the brothers were allowed to teach. And St. Francis said we could, so long as it was always done within the spirit of prayer and devotion. Christ is our exemplar, our teacher in how to come to know as he contains the human intellect perfected. And while I would never dismiss the contributions that proper academic theologians do, because this is where they are actually working out what we can say of the symbolic theology, I want to make a important point here, which is that Bonaventure maintains that the theological virtue of faith is sufficient for speculative knowledge of God. Think about that. To have the theological virtue of faith, it's sufficient for us to say proper things about God. And all of this is ultimately leading to the third mode, the contemplative. The contemplative is to become good, to achieve wisdom, to be a saint. This is applying what one knows, the faith that is sought understanding, applying that knowledge to our love and worship of God and neighbor. This is the sanctity that sustains and nourishes Holy Mother Church. It's the treasury, it's from which the treasury of merit comes, and it's the good fruit that they shall know us by. This is the mystical union wherein thinking in a finite mode ceases, and the individual is grafted into the body, caught up in a state of ecstasy. Think back to what St. Francis said about prayer and devotion. What is the purpose of all of this? If not to be united to and bound up within the divine love, which we also call divinization or theosis. St. Teresa beautifully lays out in her ascents of the prayer life, that all of this is ever geared towards that ascension, to be caught up. And to be caught up, we can therefore say that in this sense, all saints are theologians. All saints are caught up, and they have all achieved the ends for which we do theology in the first place, which brings us to our last point. What's unique to Christian theology? Many religions speculate about God, the heavens, man, creation. So if all our theology is mere speculation, is mere accumulation of knowledge and data, then ultimately there is nothing that makes Christian theology unique. This is not an equivocation either. I've had a conversation recently with a Thomist that I know of, and he accused this of equivocating terms. But when we talk about the object of our pursuits, I don't think, even though here we're breaking down and making distinctions, which is a very Thomistic thing to do, even though we're making distinctions about theology, ultimately all would agree that even without those distinctions, the ends are the same. And the purpose of our theology, to borrow a term from Blessed John Duns Scotus, is not for knowledge as an end in itself. It is, to quote Bonaventure, for the sake of contemplation, that is the third mode, and also for our becoming good, but principally for the sake of our becoming good. This is brought about, this is made possible by faith. So theology then, as a practical science, as one which we put into practice, teaches us what we are to do to attain love of God and neighbor. And the object of our pursuits, no matter what school you come from, should all be the same. Every saint, we would agree, has achieved the beatific vision, has achieved the state of theosis. Therefore, every saint is a theologian, all of them. Every single Catholic saint is a theologian and can teach us something about becoming good. That is the object of theology that we discussed at the beginning. So this is, again, is not an equivocation, right? While the Desert Fathers, while the monastics, while they may have had a unique opportunity to achieve contemplation, we are ultimately all called to be contemplatives. We are all called to be caught up. We are all called to do theology in a spirit of prayer and devotion so that we can become good. And I say here at the end that this is achieved by uniting our will to the Immaculata and through her Spirit. Now, that's a little bit of a spicy addendum there that I will discuss in another video, so stay tuned. That's it. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.